Well, of course, it is day 4 of the Pan-African Parliament here in Midrand. Quite a plethora of issues that the MPs are looking at in terms of the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area, a very big project for the African continent. And we do know this is a theme that has been declared by the African Union. But just to get an idea as to how can the Pan-African Parliament really play a role in terms of this game changer for Africa, we're joined by the chair of the committee. So thank you so much indeed, sir, for your time. Maybe first and foremost, as Pan-African Parliament, what can you do to make sure that we see the full implementation of this game changer for the continent?
Thank you very much for having me. As you know, the Pan-African Parliament represents the African people, and it has a mandate to ensure that whatever programs initiated by the African Union followed through in terms of oversighting and ensuring that what they were created for becomes a reality. So the committee that I chair, the Committee of Trade, Customs and Immigration, basically has that as a clear mandate to ensure that the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area becomes a reality. We do realize the challenges because this initiative is not old. It's about close to 5 years since it was launched. Its implementation started around 2021. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges, but there are some breakthroughs, and we hope that with the theme for this year, which is accelerating the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, then we will be able to make some kind of progress as well.
What about some of the challenges like peace and security? I mean, we look at what's happening in the eastern parts of the DRC, what's happening in Sudan. I would imagine that it's a cause for concern to make sure that the continent is fully stabilized so that we see intra-Africa trade growing.
Yeah, indeed. Peace and insecurity anywhere within our continent affects not only the security of the people in those countries, but it also affects trade, free movement of people. Where there's insecurity, obviously, you do not expect trade to thrive. So those challenges exist. But we are always hopeful because our leaders in Africa have taken a lot of initiatives. We know, for instance, in the case of the Eastern Congo, there are a lot of initiatives that have been that are taking place. For instance, the Rwanda process, the Nairobi peace plan, and many others that are trying to create some peace within that particular region. And a lot of work has been done so far. Unfortunately, in Sudan, again, we have insecurity with many thousands of people, actually millions of people being displaced internally and moving out of the borders. This has also created another crisis, which obviously affects our business as a continent to integrate the whole continent, improve trade, improve movement of people, goods and services. If there's insecurity, all that is affected.
And just before I let you go, Chair, as the Pan-African Parliament, what can you do in terms of making sure that the investment conditions are conducive in the continent so that you are able to attract the foreign direct investment from so many investors, but also making sure that when African countries are going to the multilateral institutions. For example, we had from President Ruto talking about the issue of these higher interest rates. So what can Parliament do in terms of making sure that these issues are prioritized?
Yeah, but I think there's been a lot of progress in terms of doing business in many African countries, particularly with assistance from the World Bank. Previously, investment was a bit of a challenge within the continent, but as time goes on, with improvement in governance, improvement in service delivery, doing business is becoming much easier in Africa than it was before. And maybe the main challenge that remains, especially for the local business people, are the high interest rates in the banks, which obviously restricts them from investing. But in terms of foreign direct investments, I think there's a lot of progress that has been made. If you look at the reports from different African countries, there are many investors coming in, but obviously the situation can be made better. There are challenges talked about, like corruption in some of the countries, issues of governance in some of the countries. That also affects investments. But the issues are well known, and I think there's commitment, political will from African leaders to ensure that investment within the continent becomes a reality. And indeed, even with the Continental Free Trade Area, it means that the Africans themselves will trade within the continent, but they will also be able to invest within the continent. So if the environment is not conducive, it will be very difficult to realize the objective of the free trade. So I think this is a commitment that our leaders have taken, and we as a parliament will continue to ensure that the commitment that were made are followed through, and the environment for business becomes conducive for everyone, both local and external investors.
All right, Chair, thank you so much indeed for your time. Of course, quite a very monumental task for the Pan-African Parliament to make sure that that implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area becomes a reality with a very conducive conditions as well in the continent. Khalihle Khumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.